Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so excited to have you here with us today. My name is Deanna Uzarski, and I'm on the marketing communications team here at Insight Partners. And today, of course, we're going to be talking about insights that can help you accelerate your growth with B2B marketing. So this is part of our ScaleUp CEO series, and this series is really focused on helping early and growth stage founders and CEOs and other members of that C-suite get foundational knowledge and tactical insights for building their business. Do you want to go to the next slide? All right, so before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. The session is being recorded, so you will receive that within 24 hours. Feel free to pass that along, share these insights with anyone that you would like. And if you have any questions, please submit them. And we received a ton from you guys in advance. Thank you. We'll be weaving those in throughout the conversation and hopefully get to some of those live questions as well. And there is going to be a survey at the end. It's only 2 questions. Please let us know what you thought of the session. Helps us make sure we're getting you the best content possible. So if you haven't heard of us, hopefully you have. We are Insight Partners. We have over 25 years of experience in investing in software and over 600 partners with different software companies. And a big part of what Insight does is actually something called Onsite. So Onsite is our on-site team of over 100 operators that help with all different types of business function, from sales to pricing, and of course, marketing. So today we're joined by 3 members from our Marketing Center of Excellence, including Nick Barber, who's going to be your moderator today. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Nick.
Thanks, Deanna, and welcome everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to talk with us. As Deanna said, I'm Nick Barber. I'm on our Marketing Center of Excellence. I work with Gary and Charlene across a number of different disciplines within marketing. I'm so happy to be here today. I'll be moderating all of your questions. So if you do have questions, drop those into the Q&A box. We'll get to them either in the session or at the end. And just really thank everyone for spending some time with us. I'm going to pass it over to Gary now.
Thanks, Nick. Good to see everyone today, and excited to cover one of my passion topics, marketing. I'm the operating partner that leads the Marketing Center of Excellence, and I have been at Insight for over 10 years, so have seen a few things over that period of time. Charlene?
Thanks, Gary. Hi, everybody. I'm Charlene Chen. I am part of the Marketing Center of Excellence. I've been here at Insight for almost on and off 10 years. And over the past couple of years, I've had the privilege of partnering with hundreds of founders and their teams on their scale-up journey, supporting them and learning from them. Not to mention the privilege of digging into some of our really incredible data from our large portfolio of B2B SaaS companies. Excited today to share some of the insights that we often share with portfolio companies one-on-one with this broader group. So with that, so marketing plays, why are we here today, right? Marketing plays a critical role in driving your company strategy, your market engagement and growth. It's the first point of contact between your company and its target market, and it's the fuel that powers sales. However, it's complicated. It touches multiple areas of your business, and its specific focus will vary depending on your stage of growth and your go-to-market motion. The Marketing Center of Excellence is here to help our portfolio company founders and teams navigate this complexity. In terms of how we help, we like to think about it in 3 key areas. The first is building the foundational people, processes, and systems needed to scale. Org design and hiring support is a key part of this. The next piece is around brand and strategy. So really understanding, who are you targeting in the market? What do you want to say? And making sure that those pieces are connected. And the third is then demand gen. So connecting with prospects and buyers and driving pipeline. Our session today will touch on all 3 of these areas. Our goal is to demystify marketing and share some of the insights we often share with founders and their teams when we work with portfolio companies. This session is tailored more to the earlier stage companies, but we will make sure to touch on how things may look differently at later stage companies. So first, a quick poll. Marketing's primary goal is to drive leads. True or false?
I didn't respond, Charlene, just in case you were wondering.
It'd be really embarrassing if you got this wrong, Gary. Not that there's a right
Right.
or wrong answer in a poll.
I got you. Just checking.
So Deanna, love it. So, we kind of gave, I'm sure when you signed up for a marketing session, you knew this was a bit of a trick question. So we have 72% said it's false. Again, polls aren't supposed to be right or wrong, but we do appreciate the 72% of you who chose false. For those who said true, we're gonna work a little bit here to help you, come to our side. So, um, so, um, you know, the first insight we're going to share here today is that, you need to invest in marketing, but it's really not just for the leads, right? So for early stage companies, priority one for marketing is to really help crystallize your understanding of your buyers and craft relevant and differentiated messaging. This comes before any lead gen. This is even more important today as companies look to grow more efficiently. You need to be clear on who you're targeting, the problem they're looking to solve, and be crystal clear on how you uniquely solve it. Oftentimes, founders are doing a lot of this foundational work. Marketing can really be there to help provide a framework to approach this and ensure that the buyer and market insights that you gather are being activated into messaging on the website, sales tools, and turned into content and demand gen campaigns. The second key point here is that it's to really not get too caught up on just generating more and more leads. Leads are great. We all love leads. They are especially a great opportunity to learn more about your market, your strategies, what you're testing, and hopefully a good number of these leads will convert and drive growth. Ultimately, though, leads aren't the end goal. So don't get caught up in just growing leads in a vacuum. We've definitely seen companies think they're making a ton of progress because their lead volumes are growing. But at the end of the day, what really matters is really pipeline and closed won, right? So this takes us to the next key point, which is while leads are good, pipeline is better. Marketing should have a goal around pipeline. As companies scale, marketing quickly becomes a primary driver of pipeline. Make sure that you aren't just focusing on lead numbers, but rather also on conversion and pipeline. Gary, did you
And
want to?
Char,
Yeah.
yeah, and one other point, like it's a beautiful thing when both sales and marketing are driven off the same thing. So pipeline is a shared goal. It's like a good thing.
Yep. And then lastly, who you sell to will really impact marketing's role in how you invest, right? So for example, if you sell a $500 a year product to an individual, marketing plays a much more critical role than if you sell, say, a $500,000 deal to a Fortune 500 firm, right? You would invest earlier and more in marketing in that first scenario. So we did want to give a bit more color on why invest in marketing by highlighting the key areas that marketing can support your business on. So again, marketing is really there to help you gather the buyer and market insights. So understanding who the buyers are, how they buy, the competitive landscape. This is super important foundational work and something that marketing, a lot of marketers, especially product marketers, have background and experience in. These insights will then help create differentiated, consistent, and relevant messaging, which is, again, super critical. This is something that many early stage teams have challenges with. And to be honest, even some of our later stage companies, often the issue is that, either you don't have enough insights yet into your buyers, or your messaging may be too feature focused versus customer focused. And then there's also a question of, are you really showing what makes you different versus just what's better? Gary's going to talk a little bit about that later. Your marketing leader will also help with brand building and awareness. This includes defining the look and feel of the brand, the language, and then also building awareness about buyers and influencers through strategies like PR, community engagement, and analyst relations. Then top of mind for most is driving new business leads and pipeline. This is especially relevant, again, for companies who are trying to reach a larger audience of individual or SMB buyers with a lower average deal size. So generating a large number of leads and pipeline at scale. And then lastly, we wanted to highlight sales enablement. This is incredibly important for companies who sell larger deals to enterprise buyers. In this go-to-market motion, you don't need a ton of leads from marketing early on. What you need is to make sure that the sales team is prepared for their meeting so that they can make the most out of each of their leads. Gary?
Yeah, I also like to make the point that sales enablement means different things for marketing and sales. And so when we say sales enablement, we're talking about enabling them with battle cards, enabling them with presentation decks, enabling them about how to deal with the products. On the other side is what the sales organization needs to enable is on a selling motion and how we sell. And are we going to use the challenger method or how we're going to sell? Getting those two pieces to work together are critical, and marketing and sales both need to have a role in it.
And then here we wanted to, we talked about marketing's role in driving pipeline and how that changes by your go-to-market motion. We wanted to share a little bit of data from across our portfolio. So if you look at this across the portfolio, marketing is driving 49% of new business pipeline. A quick note here, whenever we do show data, we always like to remind people that benchmarks are a data point, not a target. So we're not saying that every company is going to do this. Even as you look down at this chart, you can see there's tons of variation, and especially in an environment where things are rapidly changing. We will talk a little bit about Gen AI later. But less important here is the specific numbers and more understanding how these numbers are impacted by your strategy. So if we look at companies that are less than 50 million in revenue, that's these low revenue bucket here, you can see that there are differences in pipeline contribution by their go-to-market motion. The bar on top is for companies with a lower average deal size. So here we use less than $50,000. And the bottom is for those with greater than 50K ASP. So broadly, when you have a lower average deal size, you're selling into a larger market and you're really relying on marketing to drive awareness and pipeline at scale. Think the PLG companies, or at the extreme, companies that sell to individuals, which are almost B2C in nature. When you have a larger deal size, oftentimes in the early days, there's a lot of founder network sales, and the BDR and sales team are playing a larger role. There's only so many leads, and the larger deal sizes means that you can have people doing outreach in a more high touch way. So we'll see marketing play more of a support role. We clean these charts to make them look a little bit easier to digest, but if you were to kind of go to the extremes of these, so looking at companies even lower in average deal size, you'll see these trends accentuate, right? So marketing will be an even bigger portion of the pipeline for even lower average deal sizes.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add a little bit about the high revenue companies. And I think the best way to view the high revenue companies is to just realize that as organizations are growing in revenue, they're learning. They're learning at every level about what tactics are going to work, how much they should be spending, where to focus. We'll talk a little bit about that in some of the upcoming sections. But the goal is obviously to get to the flywheel, to get to that place where you're starting to gain efficiencies. And you can see in these numbers here where there's really a demonstrable shift in terms of where those dollars are going to marketing versus the outbound BDRs, execs, partners, and all the other pieces that are there. And a lot of that has to do with increased efficiency. It means you don't have to spend so much to bring in that net dollar of revenue.
Okay.
And I think we can jump in with one of the questions that we got from the audience. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
All right, great. So one of the questions we got is, what's the optimal investment in marketing considering startup age, funding, and revenue goals? And by the way, for those of you who do have questions, throw those into the chat. But again, what's the optimal investment in marketing?
The answer is 22.8%. 22.8. No, maybe 0.9. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Gary. So we often get asked, what is that magic number? And Gary's being facetious here, but what we really say is that it really depends. There is no hard and fast number. And this is why we always caution people about using benchmarks as a target, because they're really not meant to be a target. Ultimately, how much you invest really depends on a whole host of factors, least of which is your go-to-market motion and where you are maturity-wise. I actually saw a question in the chat which asked, when we say your go-to-market motion, That's what we mean by the low average ASP, right? So if you have a lower average deal size, you probably have more of a bottom-up go-to-market motion. You're selling to a very large market of potential customers. And then these revenue numbers are more a sense of your stage of growth and your company maturity. So are you a lower revenue company because you're smaller, or are you a higher revenue company because you're larger? So there's a lot of differences in terms of how you invest depending on that alone. But in addition, we always say at the end of the day, it's every company is different, right? Because it really depends on, have you achieved product market fit? Have you had, do you have you achieved repeatable traction within specific use cases, right? And then as you test and learn the different channels and the different areas of investing, are you getting that ROI? And if you are, that's when you start scaling. Some kind of high level data points that you should keep in mind is that, one, always make sure that you are balancing sales and marketing spend. Oftentimes, we see some of our earlier stage companies, especially those who sell to enterprise buyers, be caught a little flat-footed in terms of over-investing in sales and under-investing in marketing early on. So we always say, you're probably trying to hit, 30 to 40% of marketing as a percent of total sales and marketing spend to make sure you're giving that air cover. And then
Yeah, and
also, yeah.
Char, and I would add, to me, that is like one of the most critical things, because we can see it go both directions, like overspending in marketing and not enough sales to handle all the leads. That sometimes happens, and vice versa. And I think getting that balance right is super important for most of our scaling companies.
Yep. Absolutely. And then as Gary mentioned, as companies scale, you tend to, because marketing's kind of cracked a couple of those channels, you're starting to get some efficiencies, you're getting more awareness. Typically, we do see marketing become more efficient over time.
Great, thank you. I think that's all for now. We can probably move on to the next section, and I'll keep monitoring the questions.
All right. So the second section here, the second insight we'd really like to focusing on about getting the right marketing leader. And, I mentioned I've been at Insight for over 10 years, and this is an ongoing challenge for all founders at every stage, because all of our organizations are so different, the needs are so different. So what we thought we would do here is give you some ideas to start thinking about as you begin to think about a marketing leader. So the first thing is just the diversity and different kinds of skill sets that marketers bring. I always like to say that people either spike in demand gen or product marketing, and that's fine. I think each organization may need different skills at different places, but the one thing that is super important is that you want to have people that can really fit your organization at the particular stage you're in. So while someone may seem good, they may not be right for you based on where you are. Second point here is about the competencies here. There are a wide variety of competencies that marketers bring to the table, both because of their experience, their skill sets, etc. You need to really focus on your business and your needs. And even though you may talk to a colleague or a friend who says, this is the perfect kind of marketer, there is no such thing as a perfect kind of marketer. There's the right marketer for your business.
And I will say, Gary, and I'm sure, we've both done a ton of these conversations, but this prioritization of competencies is probably one of the main things that our earlier stage founders work with us on.
So hard for them. And
yeah,
so
because
hard for them.
Exactly, because oftentimes, probably you've never really hired a marketing person or managed a marketing team or worked with marketers. So there's a question of like, well, what exactly does marketing do and what do I need right now? So, in partnership with our Talent Center of Excellence, one of the things we do is we actually sit down with our founders and walk through and understand, what is your strategy? What are you trying to achieve? What are the skill sets that exist within your organization? And based on that, work together to create a prioritized scorecard, which really helps say, what are these competencies that we're looking for today?
So this is really an important point. When a company is just beginning, a fully strategic marketer that, as we like to say, isn't ready to roll up their sleeves is not going to be all that helpful. It doesn't matter if you have 5 people or 10 people. Marketers are going to need to, the leader is really going to need to get in there. They're going to need to get in there to be a player coach. They're going to need to be in there to understand who to hire, what are the skills that they need on their team. And that really demands a certain kind of person. And I will just point out to you that I've seen organizations get blinded by a name. I use these sort of nice, not nice way of describing it as name effers, who are just super excited that someone came from a really big company. Well, that is not necessarily the same kind of skill that you need as a startup. There's not the maturity, there's not the budget, there's all of these things. You need, it is okay to have a leader of your marketing organization that really is just good for companies that are sub 20 million. There is no shame in that. And that's just the way of making sure you have the right people for the right stage. And then the last part of this here is, I think Charlene put this slide, this point together for me. You know, we can all, marketers are great at telling stories, and we're great at telling stories about ourselves as well. So take the time to do the reference check. And most importantly, I might add the back channel reference check of your network to be able to really understand if this is going to be the right person for your culture, for the needs, for the stage of growth that you're at.
Yep. And again, just to we cannot emphasize how important it is to hire that right marketing leader and just any of your kind of leadership team members, right? Because they play such a critical role in shaping early stage strategy. So another thing that we often will work with our companies on is, and it doesn't, if you're not an Insight portfolio company, we advise you try to find somebody else who can do this, but there's a lot of value in trying to find somebody who has marketing experience to do that last round interview to just make sure and probe that, the person actor, not just throwing out a bunch of acronyms like MQL, ABM, like PLG at you, that they actually know what they're talking about. Because we've definitely all had situations where somebody positions themselves as an expert of XYZ, and we have that conversation. We're like, maybe not quite so.
That's because you're such a tough interviewer, Charlene. So this is just to give you a taste of what we look at in terms of competencies. And we were talking about the need to be able to prioritize those competencies. Generally speaking, you need to pick on the product marketing or the demand gen competency first and foremost. And I would say that that's important because that really puts an emphasis on the kind of skills that you're looking at. And then as you move down, yes, there are probably going to be needs in brand building. You have to make some choices on how much of that is strategy, how much of that is going to be execution. And then I would say I would put marketing ops as a competency ahead of a lot of things, because it's both the idea that they are capable of understanding the KPIs and metrics that you need to drive an organization, but also the MarTech stack that you're going to look to build and also connect to the larger data systems. And then I don't want to de-emphasize team building, because many times the role of the person who is leading marketing is to build the team, the first team. And, I've seen some situations where the head of marketing themselves is strong, but they don't build good teams, and that can be equally a problem. I think the last point I want to make about these competency areas is we have seen when we speak to those companies with successful marketing hires that one thing we don't compromise on, and that's the analytical mind and the bias toward numbers. It is, I will say, and Charlene and I have both seen this, it is never a good show when the head of marketing goes to the board meeting and one of the board members asks a very pointed question on the pipeline, and the answer is, I need to go speak to my demand gen lead. That is one of the surest way to know that you probably have the wrong person in the role. Next slide.
Great. Well, I think we're going to jump in with some questions.
Questions. Even
Questions.
better.
All right. So we've got one coming in. And again, if you have questions, keep them coming in through the Q&A box or even through the chat. I'm managing, both channels. So send those in. We've got a couple here. Just looking at time, let's start with one and see where we land. So how important is it to understand your go-to-market strategy, whether you're PLG, product-led growth, or SLG, sales-led growth, before your marketing hire?
So, it is super, super critical. I mean, for a lot of our early stage companies, right, you could initially start with like a product market. Let's say you're very early and you haven't figured out your go-to-market motion yet. You're still in the period of discovery. You can get a product marketer, maybe a director of product marketer, or even a head of product marketing, who is going to help you gather some of those initial insights and shape that initial strategy. Once you get to the point where you're really hiring that kind of head of marketing, VP of marketing, et cetera, it is really important to know what your go-to-market motion is, because as Gary was saying, there's a lot of different skill sets. And if you are more bottom up, you are probably orienting even more so into somebody who is on the demand gen side of the house, versus if you're going more top down, sales led, you're looking for somebody who really is more of like a salesperson's marketer, really adept at creating kind of, the thought leadership, content, sales enablement tools to help to help your sales team navigate those complex sales cycles. Gary, did you want anything to add to that?
No, I just think that it wouldn't be the first time that we had a portfolio company that started with one particular go-to-market motion that ended up morphing into another. And again, there's no shame with that. The idea of part of finding your product market fit is also finding the right go-to-market fit. And you may be starting with a direct selling motion and realize I need a partner motion, or you may determine that you're not getting enough uptake on your product and you need a PLG motion to be layered in. This is sort of the normal progression.
Great. So I'm keeping all these questions. If we don't have time in the section that you ask them, we're keeping them in there until the end. So let's press forward and hand it over to Charlene.
Awesome. So insight 3, this is around demand gen. So we always like to remind our companies that at the end of the day, at this stage, with limited time and resources, it really is about focus. And the reality with demand gen, while there's a lot of noise out there, we usually recommend fewer channels, stronger execution. That's really the theme here of this insight. So we look at the key points, start with the basics. 65% of marketing pipeline is from direct, organic search, and paid digital. In paid digital, 44% of spend is going to paid search. Our point here is that you can get pretty far leaning into a couple of key channels and tactics. Again, don't use these numbers as hard and fast rules. It's more the general idea that, look, there are only a handful of areas where early stage companies, you can just drive a ton of pipeline. You do want to, again, another theme that we've been talking about is adjust by your go-to-market motion. So we've talked about the impact of who you sell to and your go-to-market motion on how you hire in marketing. This is also the case in terms of how you approach demand gen. While direct, organic search, and paid digital are important across company types, if you're selling into a small market of very large enterprise buyers, right? So again, those $500,000, $1 million deals, higher touch channels like events start playing a more important role. And before we get into the other key points, I want to share some data. So as we said, this is data from a survey we conducted of our B2B SaaS portfolio companies about where does marketing source pipeline come from. As mentioned, most of that pipeline is coming from direct organic channels, followed by paid digital. So 65% overall, and it's higher for our companies with lower average deal size, right? So selling more of that volume velocity motion, and lower for our companies with a larger average deal size. For these larger average deal size companies, events play a much larger role initially, but this becomes more muted as those companies scale, because they really have to figure out how to crack paid digital and increase the use of strategies like account-based, because there's really only so many events you can go to. And then, as we just showed, paid digital was one of the largest channels for marketing-driven pipeline. Looking closer at paid digital, most of that investment will be in paid search, especially for the lower average deal size companies who are more transactional in nature and leveraging paid search to get really targeted at the bottom of the funnel. So when someone is searching on a high intent keyword like a competitor's name or a specific pain point, then there's
But
also
I,
paid
but
social.
I,
Yep.
but I always like to make the point about paid search. It's like a drug you don't want to get hooked on. It's great to jumpstart and get yourself found, but ultimately, just looking at the cost structure of paid search today and the competitiveness on certain keywords, I think, again, everyone's strategy should be to drive the organic volume over the
Yes.
paid search.
Yep. And I think that goes back to also the earlier point, which is like, even within paid search, there's kind of good ways of doing and bad ways, and we're going to look at that in a second. But it really is about how do we get very targeted and leverage our foundational understanding of our buyers to make sure we're being as efficient as possible with these investments. Paid social, it's almost always LinkedIn, right? So, maybe Facebook if you sell to end users, but if you were to focus your efforts, don't try to crack every single paid social channel. And then I wanted to flag, while content syndication is higher here for companies selling to enterprise buyers, a word of caution is that content syndication generates very top of funnel leads, right? So the ROI often isn't there. You really need to make sure you have a plan to nurture and kind of touch those leads for this to be effective.
And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here on this, but like when we're called in to help analyze the spend, the number of times that the recommendation is you should stop all content syndication is like nearly 100%. So it's a really tough channel to really get an ROI off of.
Yep. And we did want to give an example because we talked about how, how you can get paid search right. So here's a best practice example of a competitor comparison campaign from portfolio company Monday.com, right? So here, somebody searching on Monday versus Asana, a few things to flag. Monday is bidding on this term, and the ad headline makes a case for a prospect to click on the ad and learn about why Monday is better. It's very focused on what that search intent was. This then takes them to a custom landing page where that page header matches the search intent. And then Monday has laid out a nice comparison grid so that they are defining the purchasing criteria and why they are better than their competitor. The same type of idea, which is let's, understand what that search intent is, customize that copy, customize a landing page, can be applied to many other types of campaigns. I think use case campaigns is another common, early scenario. So if you know who your buyer is and you know what, and they're looking to accomplish a very specific task, like onboard a new employee, target that task and create a very, very tight flow. So that kind of brings us to the next point, which is, be targeted and relevant. Again, we touched on this at the very start of our session, but the key to successful demand gen is really a strong understanding of your buyers and strong execution. Do you know who you're targeting? Are you using the right message? Are you being consistent throughout that buyer's journey? We teased the myth of account-based, better known as ABM, and when we marketed the session. Account-based doesn't have to be super complicated, and while technology can help you, you don't need it to benefit from the principles of account-based. At its core, account-based is really about having clarity on who you're targeting, having insights that can drive relevant content and engagements, and making sure that this extends throughout the buyer's journey. So from top of funnel to close, to post-close renewals and expansion. Here's another example from Monday. So, for those of you who know, Monday is a horizontal product. So it can have many different use cases and it can sell to many different personas. Here's an example of how they reframe their product to be targeted and relevant for marketers. So you notice on the left side, all the ads speaks to that marketer persona and their pain points with relevant messaging and images. And then this drives to a custom landing page. So if you were to take this one step farther, if let's say that prospect reaches out to sales, the sales rep would then stay on that same talk track and talk about how Monday helps marketers and demo the product with that use case in mind. So our last point here is that as you scale, and have more resources, the tactics and channels that marketing uses will increase. Marketing's focus also expands beyond direct lead gen to focus more on brand and awareness. You should always be test and learning, and it's about scaling those tests as they prove out, and also hiring people to own and drive those areas. And I'm going to go through this quickly because I think we're starting to get a little behind on time. Some more data from our portfolio. Lower revenue companies have fewer resources, and therefore they're a ton more focused. The number of tactics they're using, they're focusing on just 9 versus a skills to 12. Again, focus on the trend of this data versus a specific number. You'll see them initially focusing really more on those lead gen tactics, quickly going to SEO, content, paid digital. As companies scale, they have more resources, people, and program spend. They start spending more on traditional ads. That's where you start seeing it pop for that more traditional brand awareness. You also see efforts to engage influencers like analysts and partners because you have more resources and a stronger track record, and investment in more resource-intensive tactics like account-based. As well as some tactics that naturally come with scale, right? When you have more customers, so referrals and community.
Yeah, and I think one other point just there that's worth noting. One of the reasons why the median number of tactics is increasing is, in some cases, those channels have become exhaustive, and they've gone to as many trade shows and events as they can go to. They've done as much SEO optimization they can. They need to start bridging out to find new sources, new veins of gold, so to speak.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's press forward here. We've got some questions, but I'm going to hold those until the end just to make sure that we get through our other insights, because we've got insight 4 and 5. Or actually, we're going to throw up a poll. And before we get into the category session or the category section, if you're at a startup only, we want you to answer this question. I'm at an early stage company and we're trying to build a category. Is that true? Is that false? Or does that not apply to you? I'll give you another few seconds here to answer. And let's see where we landed. Okay, so 43% of you are trying to build a category. 26% of you are not, and 30% of you this doesn't apply for. So Gary, take it away on category creation.
All right. So one of the things that we say, and you need to know, and I've worked with, I don't know, 50 some companies on their category creation strategies. And I've come to the understanding and belief that you don't need to create a category to stand out. That's not saying you don't need a category. There's some very important places a category is going to be integral. But as you're going to see here, there are many ways for you to get some of the benefits of category without going through the entire process, especially early on. So why don't we hit the next slide? So we spoke a little bit about the challenges early when a company is looking for its product market fit, that it's hard to go all in on a big lightning strike category launch. And I think that, the idea of a category is important because it does help the world navigate who you are. But that doesn't mean that you need to go to this massive investment early on. I think there's a lot of good benefit that can come from some other parts of your branding motion. That category is not critical. The one thing I will say is that doesn't mean you get to be lazy on being differentiated. Having a differentiated story is really what the difference is and what really a category is about. I see too many companies when I ask them to describe their business to say, we're a better CRM or we're a better DevOps platform. Better is not going to win the game here. Different is what wins. And if the market can't understand different, then no category mumbo jumbo is going to get you to where you need to be. Next point. That I used to use this term called findability. I think it sort of dropped out of the lexicon. Maybe I'm too old, but the idea here is, first and foremost, people need to know how to find you. The idea that you're the greatest solution, if no one knows you're the greatest solution, is a bit of a miss. And I think that as you kind of look here, you do have to have a story, and you do have to be able to explain to prospectives what is the reason that you're different. But the first thing, job one, is get found. And then I think this is one of the hardest things. Someone says, we need to hire a brand agency. We need to go big on our brand. The reason why we're failing is no one knows us. We're the best kept secret. That's another very common line we hear. Look, I would be very careful about your brand investment early on. You saw from the numbers that it's not necessarily your best case. I will tell you, job number one as a startup organization is show traction. Traction is through demand gen and driving pipeline and then converting those sales. The need for a massive brand early on is probably not your best first move.
And just to build on that, one of the reasons we actually, caution a lot of our, earlier stage companies from overinvesting is because you're still learning a ton, right? And the last thing you want to do, it's no small exercise to go through some big branding exercise, or if you decide to get billboards, et cetera, those rebrands, website refreshes can take months and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? The last thing you want is to do that, learn more about your market, and then completely realize that you were targeting the wrong persona, your messaging was wrong, et cetera. So you really want to get to the point of repeatable traction before you really make those big investments in brand.
So Qualtrics is a former portfolio company and is a super interesting story. I will tell you that in my mind, they're one of the most successful category creators. They worked with the Play Bigger organization, which is one of the drivers of many very strong big categories. And they created Experience Management, XM, and the XMOS. And it is a massive category that allows them to expand their TAM by not just being in a single market, but looking at human resources, marketing, product, every part of the organization. But there's a little story about the category at Qualtrics. There actually was a dictum that was put out that said, we will not use the word survey. Now, keep in mind, Qualtrics is a survey company. We will not use the term survey in these walls. And that was true. If you speak to anyone that worked at Qualtrics at that time, very much the case. But that did not mean that they did not spend to optimize on survey, be found for survey, make sure that they could be seen as the leader in survey. Because while the category is critical to them and it actually helps them expand their TAM, they still have to win every day on what they do, which is survey. And this is just an example of literally just from last week, a portfolio company in Israel, company Win.ai, and super scrappy way to create brand. You can see over on the left side on the right side, but the leftmost picture in the middle there is me smashing a keyboard. They created this viral campaign. All these people are insight people smashing keyboards because you don't have to be entering into your CRM system anymore. And so keyboards aren't that. And you can see the on the left-hand side, in 48 hours, 500,000 impressions, 90 videos of smashed keyboards, and 5,600 times. I think those numbers have even gone up since this post. And so, the net of all this is you don't have to spend massively to get huge impact and start to be found.
And when Gary and I were in, so I put this little slogan that they have here, always be winning there as well, because they obviously sell to the sales teams and, talk about just really understanding that persona and the market you're selling to and coming up with something that just fits them so well. This goes back again to why it's so important to make sure you really understand that your persona and that foundational strategy and have those insights.
And just super quick on this, I just want to, point out what I think is a great hack to be found in search without having to spend for the search. That's software review sites. And you can see in the example here, QuotaPath, another portfolio company. If you look, the number one, if you look QuotaPath reviews, up comes G2, and all of these review sites, they are super well indexed, and you can see you get all these amazing customer quotes which you can use, and you can even leverage this within your site as proof points for your product. So like there's a whole lot of goodness around investing in software review sites to drive brand and findability. Char, do you want to just take this one?
Yeah, so in that example, it was, QuotaPath reviews, right? But even if you're searching, this is another example about how on the category level, right? So here the search term is sales compensation software, right? So if you're an early stage company and you're looking to be discovered for, buyer target buyers, again, G2, Trust Radius, Capterra, they're all ranking on, the first page of search for that category level search. Takes you to a category page, which you can imagine a lot of buyers are using to create their shortlist. And therefore, it's important for you to kind of invest there, be there, show up right, so that you can be included in some of those shortlist searches. Okay, so we're going to move on to Nick. I'm going to assume we don't have enough time. So we're going to move on to our last insight. And a fun fact about Nick, our moderator, is that he joined us last year from Forrester Research, a leading analyst firm where he was a senior analyst covering various categories. So that's one of the advantages of Insight Scale. We can really afford to go broad and deep in our expertise. So I'm going to turn it to Nick to talk about our last insight, which relates to analyst relations.
All right. Thanks, Charlene. And this is it right here on this slide. It's usually never too early to start analyst relations. And I say that because I've had an opportunity to work with so many of our early stage portfolio companies and really portfolio companies across all of Insight. And the earlier you get started on analyst relations, the better off you'll be, because you don't just show up and get into a magic quadrant or a wave. There's a lot of work that needs to be done ahead of that time in order to set yourself really up for success. So a couple of things to know here about analyst relations. First, those analyst firms influence your buyers, particularly if we go back to when Charlene talked about that idea of a top-down or a sales-led growth motion where you're selling to enterprise buyers. Analysts at Gartner, Forrester, IDC, and others influence those enterprise buyers through the research they write and also those one-on-one inquiries. And for those of you who aren't familiar with inquiries, those are where clients of those firms get to have 30-minute phone calls or Zoom calls with analysts to ask them about what's going on in the market or which vendor should they invest in. And even if it's not in a magic quadrant or a wave, I guarantee you, as being a former analyst, those buyers are asking those analysts, hey, I know you didn't do a wave or a magic quadrant on this space, but tell me the 5 vendors that I should really consider for my purchase. So if you tell a compelling story to those analysts, they're going to become advocates for you. Second is thinking beyond those evaluations. I know you always want to be able to say, hey, here's my dot in a magic quadrant or a wave, but there's more than just an evaluation. And those analysts are working on predictions reports, trends pieces, best practices research. And really, startups featuring in waves or magic quadrants, it happens, but it's rare. So analysts are writing other pieces of research, and by highlighting impactful case studies that you have with current clients, current customers, that's one of the ways that you can get featured in those pieces of research, those predictions, trends, and best practices reports, highlighting those relevant case studies. AR messaging is, go back one slide. AR messaging is universal. So if you craft a story that's differentiated and it's focused on your market and your customers, that's not just good for you and your brand, but that's also good for your analyst relations as well. So it's not a either or decision. Ooh, do I invest in brand or do I invest in analyst relations? If you invest in analyst relations, that's going to serve you universally because it's going to tighten up your story for the analysts and those enterprise buyers, which is going to have this halo effect around your overall story. Lastly, position yourself for cool vendor, particularly for you early stage startups who are here. Gartner has a unique award that highlights intriguing, impactful, and innovative companies as what are called cool vendors. And if you win that, what we think is an elusive moniker, you can drive bottom line impact. And in fact, a number of insight companies have won that cool vendor moniker, but there's no official application process. So really tightening up your story, that enterprise story, telling it to the Gartner analysts, and really sort of crossing your fingers for cool vendors is the way to go. Some interesting key points around being cool. So a couple of things that will qualify you for cool vendor. You have to be intriguing, impactful, and innovative. We mentioned that. You've got to be less than 10 years old, less than 100 million in revenue, not included in any major Gartner research like a market guide or a magic quadrant. And the other thing that's not on here as an official requirement, but if any of your key competitors are already named cool, your opportunity to become named cool goes vastly down. One of the things because we have so many companies that were named cool, and because we can, look at some of the data across there, we did some number crunching and we found that over on the right-hand side, if we look at the number of inquiries that happen around a vendor, in the quarter that a company is named cool vendor, that's your sort of that's sort of your 1x. That's your base. The quarter immediately following being named cool, they get double the amount of inquiry volume. So there's significantly more interest in a company once they're named a cool vendor. They want to know, these Gartner clients, who are typically enterprise buyers, will set up inquiries with those analysts to say, hey, tell me about this new vendor that you've just named cool. Why are they cool? Should I go out and buy them? Couple of things. Briefings are really that way you make that first impression with the analyst. Over on the right-hand side, I've got a basic table of how you should think about structuring your briefing. And for the first time that you engage with an analyst, don't just show up and say, hey, I'm going to have a conversation, or I don't have any slides ready. This is your opportunity to really be strategic here and to really make a great first impression by outlining what you do, how you do it differently, showing your market momentum, what makes you different, some of your key customer wins, and then what's coming up next. And you should always close your briefing with an analyst with two questions. One is, what research are you working on? And two, do you need to talk with any of my customers to validate what you're seeing in the market? And that is a great way to establish rapport with those analysts and really be front of mind, because there's definitely this primacy recency effect when it comes to analysts. If you're front of mind for them, that means you'll be front of mind when enterprise buyers are asking them about you. So
one last point here, Nick. One last point here. I think it's always worth everyone noting that the job of an analyst is to learn. Their job is to learn about a market, learn about products, learn what is new. So they do actually want to speak to you, and you don't need a subscription in order for them to speak to you. So definitely leverage this. It's a very powerful tool.
100% don't need a subscription. You don't need to be a paying customer in order to brief analysts. They will take briefings from non-clients. In fact, they like doing that because it gets them out of the ecosystem that they're in. And second, the thing that I'll let you in on a secret about is you as vendors are having way more conversations with end users than the actual analyst is. So software vendors are a great proxy for having lots of end user conversations. So go talk to them.
Yeah. And so before Nick joined, I used to do our analyst relations conversations. And then after Nick joined, we would be on calls together. And I always talk about analysts, and Nick had to kind of put up with me. But one of the things I always say is that, I think oftentimes analysts also enjoy, part of the reason why people are paying the Gartners and the Forresters of the world, millions of dollars, like so much money, is because they're meant to be people who understand what's going on in that market, right? So exactly to Nick's point, if you are a company who is doing something really different and you are having those conversations and are leading edge, analysts will want to talk to you because they want to learn, what you're seeing and what you're doing, because ultimately it makes them be able to provide more value to their end clients, which are those Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies out there. Okay.
Great. We've got a little bit of time left for additional questions. We've got about 5 more minutes. I want to jump down to a topic that I know is near and dear to especially Gary's heart. There's a question in here about ChatGPT, Gary, and the impact. How does ChatGPT impact the importance of earned media in this environment, and just ChatGPT in general, and generative AI?
So glad you asked, Nick. It is, Nick's making fun, but we obviously spend a ton of time with our portfolio companies talking about how ChatGPT is going to evolve marketing, what are the areas where we think it's going to have the most impact, how they should get ready for it. And one of the things about media and the issues around earned media is that it's never been a game of volume. It's always been a game of quality. And I don't think that changes in this environment in any way. And I think, as a general operating procedure, as you think about whether it be more content, more SEO, more is not the answer. What's going to happen is, from the standpoint of organic and the Googles or the Bards or the Bings, in terms of how they're going to prioritize, they will become much more prioritized on the quality, how much it actually is educational, truly educational, how much of it actually answers very specific questions. I think there's a lot of goodness that comes from generative, and we have a bunch of on-demand webinars that deal with this topic much more deeply. But the bottom line is that, as you start thinking about your strategy, I would advise you to not just try to take a piece of technology and band-aid it over an existing process. I would encourage you to look at any of your processes, how you do it and how you want to reinvent it, given the new technology.
Great.
Nick?
Great. Love it. We had another question come in during the hiring section that we didn't get a chance to get to, but I'm going to ask that. And it was, how do you balance, when you're hiring a marketing leader, how do you balance this idea of working on the business versus in the business where resources are thin? That idea of getting your hands dirty. Any advice there?
I'll give you my thoughts, Char. I'd love to hear yours too. My view of this is, depending on the maturity of your business, the first thing your business needs is a good set of opportunities that have the chance of converting. And so working in the business to drive that with all the expertise you have is a good use of time. The working on the business really, I think shifts over time. If I'm going to make very rough swags here, but say 2/3 of your time is working in the business and 1/3 is on your business when it's early, that's going to morph and flip as the business begins to get toward that. You start hiring people, you have more mature strategies, you have results that you're able to understand and predict with more reliability. Your ROI is going up. All of those things says, okay, I can start being more strategic. I don't have to be so tactical.
Yep. I think one of the things that I often hear, and I always appreciate when I hear when we interview marketing leaders and they talk about it, oftentimes it is as they try new things, right? Like they're working on the business, right? You prove out something, and once that proves out, then you hire somebody to take that on and you can move on to the next thing, right? Like that's kind of how I think about that balance. Because I also want to be clear, like you can be somebody who is hands-on and still be strategic, right? It's just a matter of how do you make sure that, you're not just trying to delegate, or your marketing leader is not just trying to delegate things to third parties and junior folks without really spending that quality thinking time to understand, how do I crack this channel, and is this a worthy channel for us to lean into?
All right. Well, thank you, Charlene and Gary. I'm going to hand it back over to Deanna to close us out.
Thank you so much, everyone. This was an awesome conversation. I really appreciate everyone coming in, bringing your questions, and especially to our speakers today, Nick, Charlene, and Gary. Thank you so much. Just a quick reminder that this was recorded, so you'll receive a link to that within 24 hours following the session. Please take the survey. We can't wait to see your guys' feedback, and thank you again for joining.
Thank you, everybody.